I never imagined my life would take such an unexpected turn, but there I was, standing in front of the narrow, fluorescent-lit airplane bathroom. It was meant to be a special trip, our first anniversary, a week-long vacation in the Caribbean, just the two of us, far from the noise of everyday life. Clara, my young, radiant wife, was the love of my life, my partner in every adventure, my dream. We had our ups and downs, but this was supposed to be a celebration. Or so I thought. The door opened, and I caught sight of Clara, standing too close to another man, her eyes closed as they shared a kiss so intimate, I felt like an intruder. The man had sharp features and a confident grin, one that seemed to say he knew exactly what he was doing. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I took a step back and silently shut the door, my hands shaking. I stood there for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the plane and the laughter of passengers in the cabin. I fought the urge to burst in and confront her, to make this moment known, but I held myself back. I needed to think, to process what I had seen. The rest of the flight was a blur. The gentle rumble of the engines, the glittering of the sky outside. It all felt surreal. Clara, sitting beside me, was cheerful and unaware, chattering about our plans for the trip as if nothing had happened. I nodded, offering small smiles, but inside, the pain was growing sharper, twisting tighter. I couldn't help but feel a cold, calculated resolve begin to take root. I would let her think I knew nothing. She had no idea what I had seen, and that was the way it would stay for now. When we arrived at the hotel, the tropical paradise glistened under the moonlight, its beauty belying the storm within me. Clara was excited, pointing out the sparkling pool and the lush gardens as we made our way to the suite. I followed, pretending to share in her enthusiasm, even as the memory of what I'd witnessed gnawed at me. The days that followed were filled with activity. Clara was carefree, dancing at the resort parties, enjoying the sun and the sea as if nothing had changed. I watched her, studying her every move, learning how to mask the betrayal with a smile and a laugh. But I kept my distance, moving through the days with a calm that bordered on eerie. She never once questioned my silence, never suspected that I knew. That was exactly what I wanted. On the fourth night, when she suggested going out for a late walk on the beach, I agreed. We strolled under the silver moon, the waves lapping at our feet as if to wash away everything that had come before. Clara laughed, her eyes sparkling, and I forced myself to respond with light conversation. But underneath the surface, I was planning. I was thinking about the moment I'd walk into that hotel room and tell her nothing. Let her believe I was still the man she had been married to, still the man who trusted her. Let her think that I was too blind to see what was happening right in front of me. As we walked, I glanced at her, catching the way her hair caught the wind and how she looked at me with a small smile, her head tilted, waiting for me to say something, to tell her how beautiful she was. I stayed silent, letting the moment linger, knowing that this false peace was temporary. The end game was coming, but I would control the timing. The moment of confrontation would be mine to choose, and when it came, it would leave her speechless. When we returned to our room, Clara fell asleep quickly, her breathing soft and even. I sat by the window, staring out at the dark, endless sea, my mind racing. The betrayal had cut deep, but I wasn't done yet. I would wait, bide my time, and when the moment was right, I would make sure she knew that I knew. But for now, I let her sleep, oblivious to the storm that was building, waiting to break. The days stretched into a blur, each one marked by Clara's laughter and my silent, careful observations. She was carefree, her smile as bright as ever, and her eyes sparkled like nothing had changed. But I knew better. I knew that under the surface, beneath the playful words and the laughter, there was a dark secret that she would never suspect I knew. I kept my distance, careful not to reveal the rage that simmered just beneath my skin. I wanted her to think everything was fine. I wanted her to believe that I was still the man who trusted her, that I was still blind to the truth. One afternoon, as we lounged by the pool, Clara leaned back on her sun chair, her eyes closed and her face turned toward the sun. I watched her, the way her hair caught the light, the way her fingers played absent-mindedly with the edge of her swimsuit. I felt a wave of anger mixed with something else, something sharper, colder. I wanted to shake her, scream in her face, demand an explanation. But instead, I took a deep breath and sipped my drink, pretending to read the novel I brought along. The words blurred in front of me as I thought about how she had betrayed me, how she had chosen someone else in that tiny, suffocating space on the airplane. A man walked by, his eyes catching Clara's for a brief moment. He had a confident stride, a casual smile, and a look that told me he knew he was attractive. He didn't stop, but I watched Clara's expression shift just slightly, her smile deepening for just a fraction of a second. My blood ran cold. I knew then that this wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern, a game that she was playing with someone else. And I was the fool who had never suspected it. I forced myself to look away, to focus on the light glistening on the pool, the sound of water splashing in the distance. Clara stretched, rolling over to lie on her stomach, and I felt a pang of something I couldn't name. My chest tightened with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and a deep, almost aching sadness. This wasn't just about a kiss in an airplane bathroom anymore. It was about trust, about everything we had built together, and how it had all come crumbling down in an instant. That evening, we dined at one of the resort's restaurants, a place with candlelit tables and soft, live music. Clara was animated, telling me stories about the adventures she wanted to have, about places we should visit in the future. I nodded and smiled, every word like a knife against the hollow shell of the man I was becoming. I played my part, but inside, I was already planning. I knew that this trip was coming to an end, and with it, the calm before the storm. After dinner, I suggested we take a walk along the beach. The night air was warm, the rhythmic sound of the waves a soothing backdrop to our footsteps. The moon was full, casting a silvery light over the water. Clara took my hand, the gesture casual and warm, and I didn't pull away. I let her believe that everything was fine. But inside, I was counting down, waiting for the right moment to shatter the illusion. "I've been thinking," Clara said, her voice light, almost carefree. "When we get back, we should start planning our next trip. Maybe Europe? Italy, perhaps. We could spend weeks there. Just you and me." I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. "Italy sounds perfect," I said, my voice low. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the way the moonlight made her skin glow. I wanted to remember this moment, every detail of it, so I could hold on to it later when everything changed. "Are you okay?" she asked, squeezing my hand. "You seem distant." I met her gaze, and for a heartbeat, I almost told her, almost let the truth slip out. But I stopped myself. The moment wasn't right, and the way her eyes searched mine told me she wouldn't understand. "Not yet." "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired, I guess." We walked in silence for a while, the ocean breeze rustling the palm fronds. I listened to her laugh, the sound carrying over the gentle crash of the waves. It was strange, how normal she made everything seem, how easily she slipped back into her carefree self. Back in the hotel room, Clara flopped onto the bed, her hair tumbling over the pillow as she turned to me. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked again, this time with a trace of concern. I nodded, my expression softening. "Don't worry about me," I said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "Let's just get some sleep. We still have tomorrow to enjoy." Clara reached out, brushing her fingers against my arm. "I love you, you know," she said softly. I felt a cold, hollow space open up inside me as I forced myself to reply, "I love you too." It was the last time I would say it with any conviction. The next day, I woke up early, the sky already painted in hues of pink and gold. I had a plan, but it required patience. I would wait until the right moment, until the time when I could finally confront her without a shred of doubt in my mind. Until then, I would let her think that everything was normal, let her think I didn't know. We spent the day in the sun, Clara more cheerful than ever, as if there was no dark cloud hanging over us. But I was the one watching, the one who knew that our last night here would be the start of everything unraveling. I just needed to wait for the right moment to make my move. The sun was setting over the turquoise sea, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and deep blue. Clara stood at the edge of the balcony, her eyes fixed on the horizon, as if she could see the future out there in the rolling waves. I watched her, the way her silhouette was framed by the light, how the breeze caught her hair and made it dance around her face. For a moment, I allowed myself to remember the woman I fell in love with, the woman who used to hold my hand and whisper dreams of the future. But now, those dreams felt like a distant echo, a lie that I could no longer believe. It was our last evening on the island, and I knew the next time I'd see Clara, it would be in a very different context. I had spent the past few days gathering evidence, making sure I knew exactly what I needed to confront her. It wasn't just about the kiss in the airplane bathroom. It was about trust, about the fact that she had chosen someone else over me. And now, I was ready to make her understand that I knew, to take back the power that had slipped through my fingers. Clara turned to me, her smile warm, but there was something in her eyes, an uncertainty I hadn't noticed before. It was as if she could sense that something was different between us. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked again, her voice laced with concern. I nodded, masking my feelings with a casual shrug. "I'm fine, Clara. Just tired, that's all. This trip has been amazing, but I think we both need to rest before heading home," I said, forcing a smile. She walked over, placing her hands on my shoulders, and leaned in to kiss my cheek. It was a gesture I had grown used to, but this time it felt hollow, as if she were trying too hard to convince herself of something. "Thank you for this trip," she said, her voice soft. "It means a lot to me." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "It means a lot to me, too." The words were true, in a way. It had meant everything to me to see her happy, even if I now knew that happiness wasn't meant for me. She smiled, and I pretended not to notice the way her eyes darted away, avoiding mine. That night, we dined under the stars at the resort's outdoor terrace, the sound of live music drifting through the warm night air. Clara was animated, chatting with the waiter, laughing at the stories I shared. I joined in, laughing at all the right moments, making her think that everything was fine. But inside, I was counting down the minutes until we were back in our room, where I could finally set everything in motion. After dinner, Clara suggested going for a final walk along the beach. The moon was full, casting a silver path across the water as we strolled side by side, our feet sinking into the soft sand. For a brief moment, I wondered if I was doing the right thing, if this was truly the only way forward. But then I thought of that kiss, the way the man's face had been filled with confidence, and I knew there was no other choice. She needed to face the consequences of her actions. We stopped by the edge of the water, the waves curling around our ankles. Clara turned to me, her eyes searching mine. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips. We stood right here, talking about our future. I nodded, the memory feeling like it belonged to someone else. "I remember," I said. "We promised each other the world. But things change, don't they?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, they do," I replied, my throat tight. "Sometimes for the better, sometimes not." She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "I'm glad we did this," she said, stepping closer. I think we both needed it. The air between us was heavy with unsaid words, with truths that were just out of reach. I reached out, touching her cheek with my fingers, the gesture softer than I intended. "I needed this, too," I whispered, my voice breaking just slightly. I felt her shiver, and for a moment, I thought she knew. But the moment passed, and the truth remained buried, waiting for the right moment to surface. Back in the hotel room, Clara slipped under the covers, her breathing quick as she shifted into sleep. I sat by the window, the city lights twinkling below us, and stared at the dark water that stretched out into the horizon. I thought about what I would say, how I would confront her. The weight of the secret I carried felt suffocating, but the time for pretending was over. The next morning, Clara woke up with a sleepy smile, the light of the sun casting a glow on her face. I watched her, the weight of the night before pressing down on me. I had planned to wait, to let her think I was still blind, but now I wasn't so sure. Part of me wanted to do it now, to throw it all in her face and let the chips fall where they may. But I kept quiet, deciding to wait a little longer. I knew that when I finally spoke, it would be a moment that she would never forget, a moment that would change everything. And for the first time in days, I felt a sense of power return to me, even as I watched Clara smile and hum as she packed her things for the flight home. The storm was coming, and when it did, there would be no turning back. The morning sun cast warm, golden rays through the curtains, waking me from the restless sleep I'd fought all night. Clara was already up, humming a tune I didn't recognize as she moved around the room, folding clothes and packing her bag with a practiced ease. I watched her, noting the lightness in her movements, the way she seemed blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing between us. It would be over soon, I thought. The game was almost up. "Did you sleep well?" Clara asked, turning to me with a smile. She looked so carefree, so untouched by the weight of the reality that I was about to shatter. It made my resolve even stronger. "I did," I lied, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "Did you?" She nodded, her eyes sparkling with that same bright energy that had drawn me to her in the first place. "I did. This trip has been amazing. I'm so glad we did this." I nodded, my throat tight as I stared at her. "Me too." The room was filled with the soft rustle of bags and the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. It was a stark contrast to the noise in my mind, the rush of anger and betrayal that still roared beneath my calm exterior. When we checked out, the lobby was bustling with travelers, laughter and chatter creating a cheerful buzz. Clara stood beside me, her arm linked with mine, her face full of excitement for the journey back home. I kept my eyes on the floor, trying not to think of the way her fingers had intertwined with that man's in the airplane bathroom, the way her lips had met his with such abandon. I couldn't believe I had seen it, that it was real. And yet it was. As the flight took off, I settled into my seat, the familiar hum of the engines below us doing little to calm the storm inside. Clara leaned back in her chair, eyes closed, the corners of her mouth lifting into a smile as she drifted off. I watched her, feeling the silence between us grow heavier. I could have taken her hand, whispered that everything was fine, and that the vacation had been just what we needed. I could have pretended, let this be a story that never came to light. But I couldn't. The flight was long, and the hours stretched in a monotonous blur. When we landed, I felt a sense of urgency take hold of me, a deep instinct to face the truth head-on. We stepped out into the crisp air of the airport, and for a brief moment, I felt the freedom of knowing that I had control, that I could finally put an end to the charade. We drove home in silence. Clara chatted occasionally, recounting bits of our trip with an energy that seemed so foreign to me. I nodded, responding in half-formed sentences, my mind already working out what I would say, how I would reveal everything. But no matter how many times I ran through the scenario in my head, it never felt right. The truth was too raw, too painful. When we reached our house, I paused at the front door, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. The familiar smell of home hit me, mixed with the faint scent of the ocean that still clung to Clara's clothes. I felt my heart twist at the thought of this house being the setting for the end of everything I had believed in. Clara set down her bag and looked at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I think we should unpack and relax tonight. It's been a long journey. I nodded, my eyes fixed on her face. Yes, of course, but I knew that relaxation wasn't in the cards for either of us. That night, after we had settled into the quiet of the house, I sat in the living room, staring at the photo of us from our wedding day, framed and placed on the mantel. We were happy, carefree. I thought about that day, how my heart had been full of hope and love, and then I thought about the future I had planned that would never come to pass. I was tired of the lies, tired of the weight of betrayal hanging over me like a shadow. Clara came into the room, dressed in her pajamas, her hair damp from the shower. She looked at me, a touch of concern in her eyes. "Are you sure everything's okay?" she asked, her voice soft. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much pain she had caused, but instead, I took a deep breath and smiled, a smile that felt like a betrayal in itself. "I'm fine, Clara. Just thinking." She sat down beside me, her hand finding mine, and for a moment, I felt the weight of her touch. I let it happen, knowing it was the last time I would ever let her believe that everything was okay. I would let her think that I was a fool who hadn't seen, but she would soon learn that she had underestimated me. "Tomorrow," I whispered to myself, "it ends tomorrow." Clara rested her head against my shoulder, her body relaxing as sleep started to claim her. I let her, knowing that the moment she woke up, everything would change. The silence in the room felt suffocating, but I let it hang there. Tomorrow, I would finally tell her what I had seen, make her understand that the lies were over, and I would walk away with my head high, knowing I had reclaimed the one thing she had taken from me, my dignity. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting thin bars of light across the floor. I woke up early, the tightness in my chest making it impossible to rest. Clara still lay beside me, her breathing deep and steady, a picture of innocence. I stared at her, the weight of the truth pressing down on me, suffocating and relentless. It was time. No more pretending, no more silence. Today, everything would come out. Clara stirred and opened her eyes, the soft smile spreading across her face as she saw me watching her. "Good morning," she said, her voice tinged with sleep. I nodded, but it felt like an echo in the cavern of my mind. This was the moment, the last moment before everything changed. "Clara, we need to talk," I said, my voice low but steady. She sat up, the smile slipping from her lips as she sensed the seriousness in my tone. "What is it?" I took a deep breath, the words like lead in my throat. "I know." Her eyes widened, her body stiffening as if I had struck her. You know what?" "Everything," I said, my voice breaking just slightly. "I saw it. I saw you with him on the plane. The way you looked at him, the way you kissed him. It was enough." A silence stretched between us, the room suddenly too small, too suffocating. Clara's face crumbled as the truth sank in. I watched her eyes fill with disbelief, then with guilt that she couldn't hide. You don't understand," she whispered, her voice choked. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. I never meant." I held up my hand, stopping her before she could continue. "No, Clara, you made a choice. You chose him, and I'm not going to pretend that I didn't see it or that it didn't destroy me." Her mouth opened and closed, her chest rising and falling as if she couldn't catch her breath. "Please, you can't just—" "I already have," I said, standing up and looking down at her, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and sorrow. "I've already decided." I walked out of the room, the silence behind me as heavy as the secrets we'd kept. I could feel her eyes on my back, but I didn't turn around. I needed to be strong, to take control of the chaos she had brought into my life. As I stood in the hallway, I picked up my phone and dialed the number of a friend who worked in real estate. There was no more time to waste. Clara appeared in the doorway, her hair tousled, eyes swollen. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm making arrangements," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "You're not staying here, Clara. You'll find a hotel. or you can go back to your parents' place. It doesn't matter. But this is over." Her face contorted with a mixture of shock and desperation. "Please, don't do this. We can fix it. We can go to therapy. Talk it out." I shook my head, the finality in my gaze unmistakable. "You broke something that can't be fixed. I'm done pretending that everything is okay. I'm done lying to myself." Clara fell to her knees, her hands covering her face as the sobs broke free. I felt a pang of guilt, a sharp twist in my chest at the sight of her pain. But it was a pain I had to let her feel. It was the consequence of her choices, the reality she needed to face. "Leave your things," I said, my voice softer now. "I'll have them sent to you later. Just please go." I walked out to the living room, my hands clenched at my sides. I needed to take action, to make sure I followed through. I could already hear the soft sound of her footsteps behind me as she gathered her things. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I had to stay strong, even if it was tearing me apart from the inside out. Clara stood by the front door, her suitcase in hand, eyes red and swollen. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible. I nodded, the weight of the moment pressing on me. "Goodbye, Clara." And just like that, she was gone. The house, once filled with warmth and the sound of shared laughter, was now cold and silent. I sank into the chair, my hands trembling as the adrenaline wore off. My heart was still racing, but the storm inside me had started to settle. There was no more doubt, no more pretending. I had faced the truth, and now it was time to move forward. The phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, seeing the name of my lawyer on the screen. I answered it, my voice steady but firm. "Hello. Are you ready?" came the reply. I took a deep breath, looking out at the empty street where Clara's car had been. "Yes," I said. "Let's begin." This was the end, but it was also the beginning of something new. I would rebuild my life, piece by piece, until I was whole again. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I felt free.